Father for me is a pretty complicated word. My father was physically abusive when I was a little girl. No one was really calling it child abuse back then. It was more like, I'm going to grab my belt. But there definitely were days I couldn't go to school. There definitely were days I couldn't sit in a chair. So there was the physically violent, angry side to my dad. That's complicated enough for a child, right? But what also complicates the concept of dad for me is he was the life of the party. Super fun. Everyone wanted to be around him. He could command a room. So when I tried to put those two things together as a child, it was confusing because on one hand at home, he didn't feel very stable. And then on the other hand, in public, people really gravitated to my dad. So yeah, dad for me is a pretty complicated word. Growing up with my father, I definitely learned some survival skills. I learned to leave the room when he entered, mostly because he was unpredictable, and I just never was really sure where things were going to go. I got pretty good at a pretty young age at reading the room. There were a couple of incidents in childhood that are indelible in my mind, and one of them occurred when I was a little girl. I'm going to say maybe 7 or 8, maybe 9. And my dad asked me to go upstairs and get him a coffee refill. And I'm thinking I must have been, maybe 7 or 8. This felt like a pretty big job. I certainly hadn't done it before. So I took his coffee mug and I went upstairs and I filled it. And what I didn't know was that the coffee pot had been off for some time. So I was carefully walking down stairs, not spilling a drop of this lukewarm coffee. And my dad took a big swig of it, and that's all it took to trigger my dad to anger. And the next thing I knew, like I was flying through the air and the coffee mug was flying through the air. We were both airborne. And so those were the kinds of things that could happen just in a flash. Something could set him off and you were in his crosshairs. And then you had bruises. I spent my childhood in fear. I think almost everything I did as a child was governed by fear. I was afraid the boom would lower, the boom being my dad's hand. I was afraid that I would never be worthy to him or important enough to him to not be disciplined so severely. I think fear is the overriding thing that comes to mind, though. I just spent so very much of my childhood afraid that he would hit me. Later, when he went to jail for not paying child support, afraid that my friends would find out that my dad was wearing an orange jumpsuit. Afraid that when I was older, would never be able to put my own family together. Just a whole lot of fear. My relationship with God, I will tell you, we talk a lot about honoring our father and mother, as well we should. It's biblical. It's the only commandment with a promise. It's a good command. But I had to really step into that. One Bible verse in particular was key for me. And it's Psalm 62:7, and it says, "My salvation and dignity depend on God." And that was a game changer for me. No one else gets to set my honor. There's a nobility about following Jesus and standing on God. And I think once I grasped that, then I could operate from a position of strength. And then I could honor my dad. That was new territory for me. How do you honor someone who is dishonorable? I'm telling you, the Word of God unlocked that for me. And God, who does so many things in so many upside down ways, trained my heart to honor someone who really hadn't earned it. And as a result, I think not only did I become a person of honor, but I think when we flip that script, when we are able to look at someone who's harmed us so much and honor them, it is the highest proof that we actually are becoming more like Christ. Overcoming my father wounds. That's a great question. I think, do we really overcome that? Do we ever totally overcome that? I think I'm close. I love my dad. I have forgiven my dad even though he never asked. And I want to honor my dad. And, maybe part of honoring my dad in this really complicated sort of dynamic that we had is just being honest about it and understanding that he was not healed. He parented from that place. And now I can look at him and maybe look at some of the lovely things he gave to me and just move on, right? This life is full of joy. It's good. There is victory. There's redemption. All of these things that we want as Christians are available to us. And so I think on the scale of overcoming, if 0 is you're just not doing the work and 10 is you've arrived, man, I'd like to say I'm a solid 9.5.